Have you ever noticed that the more you awaken spiritually, the more you begin to see things that others simply ignore? And it's not because you're better or more evolved. It's because your eyes can no longer pretend not to see what's right in front of everyone. The world seems the same, but something changes. Conversations sound hollow. Smiles seem rehearsed. People are constantly chasing something that, deep down, doesn't exist. It's as if everyone is participating in a grand performance, and you're the only one who understands the script. In this video, you will understand what the spiritually awakened really see, those truths that almost no one has the courage to admit, because it's not pretty nor comfortable, it's brutal, revealing, and completely transformative. You'll discover why once you awaken, it's impossible to go back to living the way you did before. You'll understand what's behind the social masks, the false success, the superficial relationships, and even the distorted idea of happiness sold out there. Get ready. What you're about to hear may change the way you see the world and the people around you. It might even make you understand why lately you've felt different, out of place, or even strange around those who are still spiritually asleep. This video isn't for those seeking comfort, it's for those seeking truth. And once you know this, there's no unseeing it. Now you understand what few have the courage to admit, and it changes everything. When you see the world clearly, nothing deceives you, nothing holds you back. This kind of truth liberates, strengthens, and elevates you to another level of consciousness. That's why those who come this far are part of a truly awakening minority. Show that you are one of them. Like this video and subscribe to the channel to continue receiving content that opens your mind and strengthens your spirit. With each new video, you'll feel more prepared to deal with the world as it really is, not as they want you to believe it is. You know when you start to notice something's off, but you can't quite explain what. People go on with their lives, talking about the same things, complaining about the same things, believing the same lies. And suddenly, you feel like you're watching it all from the outside. It's as if the world were a theater full of actors who don't even remember their acting, and you're the only one who realizes the play is just a performance. This is the first sign of spiritual awakening, when your eyes can no longer pretend they don't see. And the curious thing is that this doesn't happen because you wanted it or planned it. It happens almost naturally, as if something inside you simply said, enough. You start to notice small things, details that previously went unnoticed, the falseness in certain conversations, the hollow tone of some laughter, people's exaggerated effort to appear happy, and the more you notice, the harder it is to fit in. The things that once motivated you lose their luster. Distractions no longer entertain you, and silence begins to feel more genuine than any conversation. Many people think that awakening is something mystical, full of light and peace, but the truth is that at first it's confusing, uncomfortable, and even lonely. It's the moment you realize that the world you live in isn't as real as it seemed. And then comes the shock, realizing that almost everything around you is appearance, that people are constantly trying to maintain an image, pretending to have control, when in reality they're trapped in a cycle of fear and approval. You begin to see how much the system feeds this game, selling the idea that you need more, that something is still missing to be happy, that you'll only find peace when you achieve your next goal. But the awakened see the trap. They understand that this more never arrives, because the world is programmed to keep you chasing something that doesn't exist. And when you realize this, it feels like the ground opens up. Everything that once made sense starts to seem too small. Maybe you've felt it too, that feeling of looking around and wondering, how can people not notice? It's like watching an illusion maintained by pure repetition. Everyone repeats what they hear, believes what they see on screens, and no one questions anything. The awakened realize that the modern world is a distraction factory, designed to keep people busy, tired, and numb. And once you wake up from this, there's no way to go back to sleep. That's why so many awakened people feel out of place, as if they're in a place that no longer suits who they've become. And the truth is, they're right. The world hasn't changed. What's changed is the way they see it. But it's not just about perceiving external falsehood. True awakening begins when you begin to truly see yourself, when you understand that, for years, you also wore masks, also pretended, also sought approval. And that's where the hardest part comes, facing your own illusion. The awakened person realizes that the ego is the master director of this theater, and that for a long time it was the one that dictated the rules. The ego wants control, it wants recognition, it wants security. But the more you try to control, the further you move away from the truth, and when this understanding arrives, the penny drops. It's a mixture of liberation and loss, because at the same time as you free yourself from the lie, you realize that the world you knew was sustained by it. And this is where many people go into crisis, because seeing too much comes at a price. The awakened see things they'd rather not. They perceive intentions, sense energies, understand what's behind words. And often, this is frightening. You begin to notice the emptiness in relationships, the superficiality of promises, how afraid people are to be authentic. It all seems like a big game of make-believe. But instead of judging, the awakened understand. They see that all of this is a reflection of the collective unconscious, of a world trained to run away from the truth. And it's at this point that you understand why the awakened withdraw. It's not arrogance, it's self-preservation. When you start to see beyond, being among those still asleep is exhausting. It's like trying to explain colors to someone who's only seen black and white. People won't understand and will often mock, criticize, or distance themselves. It's the price of seeing too much. But at the same time, it's the beginning of true freedom, because for the first time you're not living on autopilot. You start living consciously, and that changes everything. And that's exactly what I want you to think about now. How many times have you noticed something wrong around you and preferred to stay quiet? How many times have you pretended not to see it to avoid causing discomfort? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I see. Just so I know you're part of this group that sees what most people still don't have the courage to admit. It's a symbolic way of showing that you've also awakened, that you already feel this difference. But what comes after seeing all this is what truly changes the game. Because seeing the truth is just the first step. What you do with it is what defines the course of your journey, and that's precisely where most stumble. Because the second stage of spiritual awakening isn't about the outside world. It's about what's happening inside your head and heart. It's when you realize there's a silent struggle between who you really are and who you've learned to be. And this internal clash is what makes so many people give up on the path of consciousness. Because facing your own reflection without a filter is painful. You begin to realize how much of your choices were based on fear, how much of your actions stemmed from the need to be accepted, loved, or validated. And the curious thing is that, even knowing this, part of you still tries to cling to the persona, as if it were the only thing keeping you safe amidst this chaos. This invisible war is constantly going on. One part wants to change, evolve, and break free. The other wants stability, routine, and comfort. And this conflict isn't something you resolve overnight. It's something you learn to observe. Because when you awaken, you realize that the real enemy was never the world, but your resistance to being who you truly are. Your mind begins to fight to pull you back into your old automatic mode, the one where you conform to others' expectations, lived to please and called it peace. But the awakened can no longer pretend. They feel, even unwillingly, the weight of every lie they still carry. And the hardest part is that this internal struggle isn't something others understand. When you start to change, people around you think you've become strange, distant, different. They don't see what's happening inside you. They just notice that you no longer react the same way, no longer laugh at the same jokes, no longer take the same interest in the same topics. And it's at this point that many awakened people feel lost, because it's as if they're caught between two worlds, the old, which no longer makes sense, and the new, which is still unknown. This limbo hurts. It's the moment you realize that awakening isn't a path of flowers, but of deconstruction. You start to look at yourself and realize how much you've been shaped by everything, by family, school, religion, the opinions of others. Everything you thought was you begins to crumble. It's as if every certainty that sustained you shatters, one by one. And that's when the most important question of all arises. Who am I without all this? The answer, of course, doesn't come quickly. And that's why so many people feel afraid, try to go back, try to fit back into their old role. But the problem is, once you awaken, the character no longer fits. It tightens, suffocates, doesn't fit. In this process, silence becomes your best friend. It's in silence that you begin to hear what truly matters. And curiously, that's when pain begins to transform into clarity. You understand that conflict isn't meant to be eliminated, but understood. It's what shows you where there's still attachment, where there's still fear. And when you begin to observe this without running away, without blaming others, something changes. You stop being a victim of your own ego and start to witness it. It's the beginning of inner freedom. But don't think this makes you superior to anyone. Quite the contrary. The more you understand yourself, the more you realize that everyone is fighting their own internal battles. It's just that not everyone has the courage to admit it. And this generates compassion. You stop judging, stop trying to change others, and start focusing on the only transformation that truly matters, your own. This is when the awakened person begins to mature spiritually, because they understand that the struggle is not to be won but to be transcended. And deep down, this is what separates those who awaken from those who remain asleep. Those who awaken face the truth, even when it hurts. They don't shy away from the shadows within, because they know that's where the gold lies. And each time you face a part of yourself you've tried to hide, a new part of your consciousness awakens. You begin to realize that peace lies not in eliminating chaos, but in learning not to get lost in it. Now, tell me something in the comments. Do you feel this conflict within yourself too? That feeling of being torn between what the world expects and what your heart desires? Write the word conflict down here. I want to see how many people are actually going through this awakening process and recognize themselves in it. There comes a point when the awakened realize something that changes everything. Most people live trapped in an endless cycle of desire and frustration. It's as if the entire world is driven by a hunger that is never satisfied. People want a better car, a bigger house, a more beautiful body, a more attentive partner, a higher salary. And when they get it, they barely enjoy it. Soon another desire arises, and another, and another. It's a cycle that never ends. The awakened, when they begin to see this, feel a mixture of shock and compassion, because they realize that this is the mechanism that keeps most people trapped, without even realizing they're chasing a mirage. This realization is brutal, because it shows how much we've been conditioned from an early age to believe that happiness always lies in something we don't yet have. We grow up hearing phrases like, "When I achieve this, then I'll be happy. When I get married, when I have money, when I retire." And so life passes by while we live forever projected into the future, always postponing our own peace. The awakened understand that this is a trap. They begin to see that the momentary pleasure of achieving something soon turns into boredom or new anxiety. And it's in this back and forth that suffering sets in. The human mind has been trained to never be satisfied. And when the awakened see this, they begin to laugh, not out of irony, but out of lucidity, because they realize the absurdity of the game. They see how much the system needs people to remain dissatisfied to keep functioning. If everyone were truly at peace, half the things sold today would simply cease to exist. Advertising, fashion, the entertainment industry, they all feed on this idea that you're missing something. The awakened understand this, and little by little begin to step out of the game. They discover that true freedom lies not in having everything, but in not needing everything. And the curious thing is that when he begins to break free from this cycle, the world tries to pull him back in. People find it strange that someone isn't desperate for status, recognition, more followers, or more money. They think he's lost his ambition, when in fact he's only gained consciousness. The awakened understand that desire, when driven by the fear of not being enough, will never bring happiness, because it always comes with a feeling of lack. It's like drinking seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. This is one of the reasons why many awakened people begin to seek simplicity. Not because they reject comfort, but because they begin to realize the weight of everything that is excessive. They realize that the more things you accumulate, the more trapped you become. More obligations, more bills, more worries. The mind fills with noise, and suddenly, the peace that seemed distant begins to emerge when you let go of what you believed to be essential. This doesn't mean that the awakened person becomes a hermit or lives isolated in the woods. It just means that they change the way they relate to the world. They still have desires, but they are not dominated by them. And that's where true balance emerges. Because when you stop seeking happiness outside, You start finding it within, and that completely changes the game. Life still presents challenges, of course, but they no longer control you. You no longer live with the feeling of needing everything all the time. And the most impressive thing is that when you let go of this pressure, things begin to flow naturally. What's yours comes to you. What isn't yours moves away. It's as if the universe responds to your new internal state. And that's why those who awaken no longer pursue anything with desperation. They trust. But the most beautiful thing about this phase is realizing how much you begin to appreciate the simple things. A sunset, a hot cup of coffee, a sincere conversation. Things that once went unnoticed become precious, because the awakened understand that happiness isn't something you achieve, it's something you feel. It's present in every moment you allow yourself to be present, but few people want to admit this because the whole world revolves around consumption, comparison, and the race for something bigger. And the awakened realize how exhausting this race is and how much it steals people's lives, one distraction at a time. Now tell me something. How many times have you believed you'd be happy after you achieved this thing? And when you did, you realized you still felt the same emptiness. It happens to everyone. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Cycle, just so I know you. Understand that this game has no end and that you're ready to leave it. Because understanding this is the first step to true freedom, and it's precisely this inner freedom that will prepare you for what comes next. When you discover something even deeper about ego and control, what comes after seeing the cycle of desire is one of the most difficult discoveries for those who awaken. Realizing that the ego is the great manipulator of everything. It's the ego that convinces you that you're in control, that you need to fight for recognition, prove something to the world and be someone important. The ego is like a character you create to survive, and over time, you forget you're playing a role. And the most ironic thing is that, while you think you're in control of your life, it's precisely the ego that's in control of you. It dictates what you feel, what you fear, and what you believe to be happiness. When the awakened person realizes this, it's as if a mirror shatters inside them. Everything they believe to be me begins to unravel, and the question that changes everything arises: who am I then? The ego always wants to be right, wants to be certain, wants to be in control. It can't stand the idea that life is unpredictable, so it creates plans, expectations, and narratives to give you a sense of security. But the awakened see through the farce. They understand that control is an illusion, that life was never about mastering everything, but about learning to flow with. What happens? When this awareness arrives, many people panic because the ego feels threatened. It makes noise, creates doubts, tries to convince you that you're losing your way. But in reality, that's precisely when you begin to free yourself. It's at this point that the awakened discover something profound. The ego isn't the enemy, it's just a defense mechanism. It arose to protect, but it ended up imprisoning you. And the most liberating thing is when you realize you don't need to fight. Just observe. The more you try to defeat the ego, the more it grows. But when you observe it without identifying with it, it loses power. It's like watching a character perform on stage, and instead of joining in, just watching. This is true freedom. You still feel anger, fear, jealousy, pride, but now you know that this isn't you. It's just the ego reacting. And here comes one of the hardest truths to admit. Most people live their entire lives without ever realizing they're being commanded by an inner voice that isn't theirs. This voice says, you need to be better, you need to win, you need to prove yourself. And the awakened begin to realize the absurdity of this. They understand that the more they try to control, the less they live. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The harder you hold it, the more it slips away. Life is like that. It wasn't meant to be controlled. It was meant to be lived. And when you surrender, something magical happens. Fear begins to disappear. The ego thrives on comparisons. It needs to feel superior to someone else to validate itself. That's why it loves to create competition, disputes, and drama. And that's when the awakened person starts to laugh, because they realize how petty it all is, how much energy people waste trying to defend an image. They see the world as a grand stage where everyone is trying to convince everyone else they know what they're doing. But no one really does. And the funny thing is, when the awakened person accepts this, they finally find peace, because they understand that life was never about winning, but about experiencing. This realization completely changes the way you react to the world. Situations that once made you despair begin to lose their power. You stop reacting impulsively and start responding consciously. Anger still comes, fear still appears, but you no longer get lost in them. It's as if, suddenly, you learn to watch the movie without confusing the screen with reality. And the more you practice this awareness, the lighter life becomes. You understand that you're not the protagonist trying to control the script. You're the observer, the one watching everything unfold. And it is at this point that the awakened finally understands the difference between living and existing. Living is being present, feeling, allowing things to flow. Existing is trying to control, fighting against what is, resisting. The ego thrives on resistance. The awakened one thrives on surrender. And this surrender is not giving up, it is trust. It is knowing that life knows what it is doing, even when you don't understand. It is this trust that brings peace. Now tell me, how many times have you lost sleep trying to control something that ultimately resolved itself? How many times has fear made you act against your heart? Write your words in the comments below. Ego, if this has ever happened to you, then I know this message really touched you. Because when we recognize the ego, it already begins to lose strength. But the most interesting thing is that when the awakened person learns to let go of control, something unexpected happens. He begins to feel the weight of the emotions of the people around him, and the world begins to react in a completely different way to his presence. And that's exactly where everything changes. When the awakened learn to let go of control, they begin to realize that their very presence has a huge impact on others. Even if no one says anything, it's as if their energy speaks for them. Have you ever noticed that there are people who, just by entering a room, make the atmosphere heavy, and others who, without saying a word, bring lightness and calm? The awakened become this kind of person who changes the air of a place with just what they carry inside. It's a natural effect of someone who is no longer vibrating with rush, competition, or fear. They live on a different frequency, and this is something the world feels. But this vibration, while attracting people, also pushes others away. Because the energy of an awakened person stirs what's hidden in others. It awakens in others exactly what they try to hide from themselves. That's why sometimes the awakened person notices that people close to them begin to distance themselves for no apparent reason. It's uncomfortable to be around someone who forces you, even unintentionally, to look at your own truth. The light of the awakened person illuminates what many prefer to keep in the shadows. And the curious thing is that they don't do anything on purpose. They just are. And the simple fact of being who you are already has a profound impact. Therefore, the awakened person realizes they can no longer be anywhere or with just anyone. They sense when the atmosphere is heavy, when the conversation is empty, when the energy is draining. And, little by little, they begin to distance themselves from what doesn't resonate. It's not arrogance, it's protection. It's like a sensitive field that needs to be preserved. Being around negative or superficial people is like breathing polluted air. After a while, the body and mind begin to suffocate. The awakened person feels this firsthand, and the more they try to force connections that don't make sense, the more the universe shows signs that it's time to leave. This awareness brings a mixture of power and loneliness, because while the awakened one feels they influence everything around them, they also realize that few can keep up. They see patterns of behavior, feel emotions that others hide, perceive intentions that no one admits. And this is exhausting. It's like living with an antenna constantly on, capturing everything. Therefore, many awakened ones learn to remain silent. They no longer try to convince anyone of anything, nor discuss what the other is not yet ready to understand. They simply observe. They know that time is the only teacher that truly teaches. And the more he remains silent, the more he sees how loudly the energy speaks. Sometimes just the presence of an awakened person in a room changes people's behavior. It's as if their vibration creates a field of truth that makes others reveal themselves. Some open up, others feel uncomfortable, some even withdraw. But everyone is affected. And this shows the power that comes from within, the power of being authentic, without pretense, without masks. The awakened person doesn't need to command respect. They exude respect. They don't need to prove strength. They transmit strength. They don't need to seek approval because they have already found their own peace. The most fascinating thing is that when he understands this energetic power, everything changes around him. Situations that once irritated him no longer affect him as much. Arguments lose their meaning. He realizes he doesn't need to react to everything. True influence comes not from what you say, but from what you vibrate. And the awakened discover that silence is often more transformative than 1,000 words. This isn't passivity, it's awareness. It's understanding that not every war deserves your energy, and that inner peace is the true battlefield where you win everything. But there's an important detail that no one talks about. This sensitivity is also a burden. Feeling everything so intensely is tiring. Therefore, the awakened individual needs to learn to recharge. This is why many prefer nature, silence, and solitude. Being away from the noise of the world is a way to cleanse the energy field. And ironically, it is in these moments of solitude that one feels most connected to everything. Because, without the noise of society, one returns to listening to one's own center. Now tell me something. Do you feel like your presence changes the atmosphere? That people react differently when you arrive? Write the word here in the comments. Energy. So I know you've already noticed this impact. It's amazing to see how many people are beginning to awaken to this invisible power that doesn't come from appearance or voice. It comes from frequency. And the most interesting thing is that when the awakened person learns to use this energy consciously, he begins to understand why being around many people can be so exhausting. And that is precisely what leads him to rethink his relationships and choose with whom it is truly worth sharing what he carries inside. After understanding the power of their own energy, the awakened person begins to clearly see something that previously went unnoticed: loneliness. But it's not that sad or melancholic loneliness. It's a different, conscious loneliness. It's the moment they realize that the path to lucidity naturally separates them from the crowds. Because while the world rushes by, trying to fill the void with noise, the awakened person begins to understand that silence is where the answers reside. They no longer run from loneliness. They learn to listen to it. It's there, without distractions, that they realize how much they've grown and how much the world is still trapped in the same cycle of repetition. At first, this distance is scary. You miss old conversations, the people you laughed with without much thought, the situations that seemed simple. But now none of that fulfills you in the same way. Conversations that were once fun now feel empty. People you admired seem trapped in characters, and the environment that once made you feel part of something now suffocates you. And that's when the awakened understand solitude isn't punishment, it's cleansing. It's the universe removing from your sight everything that distracted you from your truth. When you stop fitting in, it's because you no longer belong. And that's a sign of evolution, not failure. This phase is one of the most silent and also one of the most revealing. It is in this phase that the awakened learn to be with themselves without running away. They begin to perceive their own company differently, discovering that the value lies not in having 1,000 people around, but in being whole, even alone. Solitude, once feared, becomes a fertile ground for self-discovery. It is in this phase that they learn to distinguish what is theirs and what is the influence of others. It is in this phase that they reconnect with their own essence without needing to explain themselves, please, or pretend. And the most incredible thing is that the more they align themselves internally, the more they realize they are not truly alone. There is something greater accompanying them all the time. But the world doesn't understand this. People look at the awakened and think they've distanced themselves, that they've changed too much. And indeed they have. But no one sees what's happened inside. They don't see the exhaustion of pretending, the weight of feeling too much, the strain of trying to explain what others can't yet understand. The awakened realize that being surrounded by people doesn't mean being connected. They begin to seek quality in connections, not quantity. Few understand this, and that's okay, because they discover something few admit. Being alone is better than being surrounded by the wrong people. And this is one of the most powerful lessons of awakening, learning to be at peace with one's own silence. It is in this state that the awakened person begins to hear their own intuition more clearly. They stop seeking answers from gurus, books, or opinions, because they realize that what they were looking for has always been within them. Solitude becomes a portal, not of isolation, but of reconnection. It is there that they understand that true growth doesn't happen amidst a crowd, but in the moments when you face your own soul. Now you understand what the awakened truly see, and how this vision completely changes the way you live. You realize that nothing was random, that everything you felt had a purpose, and that this awakening isn't confusion. It's the beginning of freedom. This content brought you clarity, made you see what many still can't admit, and that's why you're now part of a small but powerful group of people who are truly awakening. And since this message made you think, feel, and see the world differently, share this energy, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and write the word here in the comments, "Wake up." This way, we will know who is really waking up. The next video will take you even deeper. It will show you what happens after awakening begins to change everything around you. And believe me, what comes next is where many stop, but the chosen ones keep going. So, stay with us. What you'll discover from now on could completely transform the way you view your own journey.